Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
Hey, I'm Rachel. It's good to be with you guys.
So Rachel, I was wondering, do you watch football?
No.
Come on. So recently I noticed, as I've been watching a lot of football, my favorite team is kind of struggling because the coach isn't as present as he normally should be. And that's actually affecting the team and their performances.
Sure, that sounds a lot like the church. The church has a leader, and when everyone listens to the leader, things go like it should. But Mike's going to tell us more about that now.
Throughout the New Testament, we read that Jesus is the head of the church. We read that in Ephesians 1:22, Ephesians 4:15, Ephesians 5:22, and in other places. In Colossians 1:18, we read, "He is also head of the body, the church, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything." In Matthew 16:18, Jesus says, "I will build my church." The church belongs to him, and he wants to build it according to his pattern, according to his ways. 1 Corinthians 3:10 tells leaders to be careful how they build church and to do so only according to the pattern Jesus has given us, not doing things our way but his. Of course, Jesus does call and raise leaders in the church. For example, we have elders and deacons. But all these leaders need to recognize that they're to serve the people and to do the will of the real leader, Jesus, the real head. We see this, for example, in 1 Peter chapter 5. The Apostle Peter writes to elders and says, "I too am an elder and a witness to the sufferings of Christ, and I too will share in his glory when he's revealed to the whole world. As a fellow elder, I appeal to you, care for the flock that God has entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you will get out of it, but because you're eager to serve God. Don't lord it over the people assigned to your care, but lead them by your own good example. And when the great shepherd appears, you will receive a crown of never-ending glory and honor. In the same way, you who are younger must accept the authority of the elders, and all of you, dress yourselves in humility as you relate to one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." Here we see that elders are called shepherds, responsible for watching over, caring for, and leading people, but they must do so with humility, remembering that Jesus is the chief shepherd. To the rest of the people, Peter says they should obey their elders, also being humble. So we see that God builds his church using leaders, but these leaders aren't there to be domineering, simply telling everybody what they must do. Neither are the leaders to act like the priests of the Old Testament, seeking God on behalf of the people and telling them what God is saying. In the New Testament, we read that all believers are priests. We read that in 1 Peter 2, verses 4 and 5. And all people have a responsibility to seek God and hear him for themselves. So how does all of this work? Well, in the book of Exodus, we're given a beautiful picture to help us. Moses is chosen by God to lead his people out of slavery in Egypt into the promised land. And this is a picture of us as believers being rescued from slavery to sin and being brought into God's kingdom. While they have a leader, God provides for them in the form of a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night to guide them. That's in Exodus chapter 13. This pillar represents the Holy Spirit leading his people, the community of faith. Here, Israel is a picture of the church. And when the cloud moved, the people moved. It didn't matter how convenient the timing was or what people's preferences were. They didn't vote. They had to obey. They had to keep up with the pillar. Like in the New Testament, we are instructed to keep in step with the Spirit, to do what he asks and go where he goes. We read that in Galatians chapter 5, verse 25. Each person in Israel was able to see the pillar for themselves. They each had that privilege and responsibility to respond to where God was going. They had leaders to help them and to guide them, to help resolve their problems, help administrate things, settle disputes, set an example in life and worship, etc. But they were expected to obey the leaders. And the leaders were expected to point people to God and to encourage them and teach them. And so it is today. Each of us has a responsibility to submit to our head, to our leader, Jesus. We need to worship Him, follow Him, listen to Him, and obey Him. Godly leaders will help us to do just that. We should follow them because they are showing us how to be good followers of Jesus. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 11:1, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. He said this not because he wanted people under his control, but because he was being a faithful follower of Jesus. This is why he instructed Timothy, who was a young man that he'd set aside to use as a leader. He said to him, set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. We can see then that Jesus is the head of the church which he loves and for which he died. Every follower of Jesus should therefore love the church and be an active part of the church. 1 Corinthians 12 and Romans 12 describe the church as a body and each of us as a body part. If we are separated from the body, we will eventually die, just as surely as a finger or a toe will die if it's removed from our physical body. For us to follow Jesus well, to be effective in the kingdom, to remain on the right path, and to experience love and fellowship as He desires, we need to give ourselves to the body and ensure that the body remains connected to the head. In other words, be part of a church that is truly following Jesus and allowing Him to really lead.
Whoa, that's actually very true. Because similar with football, when your coach knows the weaknesses and strengths of the team and each player, he actually knows how to bring the best out of everyone to make sure the team works well and plays the way they should.
Yeah, Kev, you're so right. Like in church and us as believers, we all have the responsibility to be open and honest with each other and our leaders to let them know where we're at. And that's called accountability. And Andre is going to tell us more about that now.
Hi, today's word of the day is accountability. This word can have various meanings, but when we use it within the context of church, what we are usually talking about is a willingness to let people know what is going on in our lives. Talking to leaders and those we can trust about what we're struggling with, where we may have failed. We can ask people to show us where we are not being like Jesus, or if we are doing things that are not good for ourselves or for others. It's about asking for perspective and advice before making any big decisions. It's about asking for help. In short, it's about letting people know what is going on inside our heads and our hearts so they can help us become more like Jesus. This also helps us become closer to other people. There is a temptation to think that if I share my failings and weaknesses, people will reject me. But the truth is, if we do so, we become closer to people and to God. 1 John 1:7 tells us, if we walk in the light, as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. In other words, we have deeper relationships where we are open, honest, and real with one another. And then we also grow closer to Jesus.
Okay, so we're accountable to each other, and we're accountable to Jesus, and we're accountable to our leaders, and our leaders are accountable to Jesus.
But ultimately, Jesus is the head of all of us, and that is the point. And that's why our verse of the day is Colossians 1:18. Christ is also the head of the church, which is His body. He's the beginning, supreme over all, who rise from the dead, so He is first in everything.
Whoa, Kevin, can you just say that again, but a little bit slower?
Okay. Christ is also the head of the church, which is His body. He's the beginning, supreme over all who rise from the dead. So He is first in everything. Colossians 1:18.
That is awesome. Christ is head of everything. Joe's going to tell us more about how it looks like in the church, which is amazing. He's going to do that right now.
Isn't it beautiful that the church is His bride, that He loves? And I want to say that most of my experiences with God has been in times with others. It's been when the anointing has come in worship, when the word came in community times, in braais, Sunday services, gatherings, conferences. No matter how big or how small, you can connect with God when you're amongst your brothers and sisters. And I say that I come from a traditional background, so it hasn't always been like that. So When I got saved, it was about going to church. Church wasn't the bride of Christ, it was going to a building. And as I went to this building, I went in last and came out first. It was hello brother, hello sister, but it wasn't about building family. But as I spent time with the Lord, as I spent time in His Word, I learned about loving God, loving God's people. In this time, in this age, most people either want to love God or they just want to be with His people. But many people don't have both. And I want to say that both come together. You love God and you love His people. But you can't say you love God and you don't love His people. Because the Word says that if you love God and you say that you don't love your brother or sister, then you don't love God. You are a liar. So hold both of them. If you are a person that says, I love God, but I struggle with His church, with His bride, or if you are someone that loves being in church, but you know in your own quiet time, you struggle to connect with Him, there is no hunger for Him. I want to say, if you have one, you have nothing. Because they both go together. So I want to say, for eternity, we will be together worshiping the one. And now's the time to come together. I want to say it's important to be with your brothers and sisters because they shape you, they mold you, they irritate you, they encourage you. We are shaped. God uses His people to shape us. And the world knows this. Because in the world, there's this thing that we are shaped by the people we are around. We all know this. The more time you spend with someone, you are shaped by them. So let us be a people found amongst God's people, shaped by God's people, worshipping Him together. And we can do this now and forever.
Wow, Joe has really given us the heart of what this is all about. Now, let's get practical.
Okay guys, we're going to hand you over to your leaders where you're going to discuss and talk about how to practically live out accountability in your life.